Hello and welcome to the Talking Roadmaps channel. I'm one of the co-hosts here, Justin Woods, and in today's session, I'm joined by Francesca Cortesi. Francesca, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. So why don't we jump in and maybe give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a bit about what you do.
Of course. I'm Francesca. Hi, everyone. I'm originally from Italy, but I've been working and based in Stockholm for the past 12 years. And in all those 12 years, I've been working with product development. And latest here, I'm CPO or Chief Product Officer for the ones like me that don't really love acronyms at Hemnet, which is the biggest property portal in Sweden and one of the most loved brands in the country as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And you've got a rich background of product management and project management and also engagement and things like that. So a kind of a really relevant background.
Yeah, I mean, I normally say that I fell into product. I mean, back in the days, there was not really something in product management, maybe in the US, I might say, but not in Europe. So it was a lot about digital products, and it was project management first. And then I worked with engagement, communities. And then, I mean, as the year were going, I realized that's actually product management that I was doing. So yeah, I've been seeing piece and bits of not everything, but many different companies.
Love that. And do you know what? My journey was the same. I found about product management by working with product managers and then going, hang on, that's all of the combination of skills and things they're doing that I really want to do. And then once I found it, I've pretty much been in that area with many areas of my career. So that's really great.
Why not subscribe? Click the bell icon and give us a like.
I wonder if we jump in and talk a little bit about roadmaps and maybe what, from your perspective then, what the purpose of a roadmap is.
Can I start with a controversial revelation here? Maybe like in this talk. But I mean, I was one of the ones that every time one of my stakeholders asked me for a roadmap, I was rolling my eyes and I was thinking, no, ever, no, I'm not gonna give you that. Because at the beginning of my career, I was really linked with the roadmap as a set of feature, basically, that someone wanted out of me. And back then, I've not seen that working. I mean, just like basically, if you want a set of feature from me, you want me to predict the future and say that nothing will ever change. And then you're gonna hold me accountable for that. And that, at the beginning, I was a little bit naive and I did that. And then I got burned a couple of times and I stopped even saying the word roadmap. It was almost like taboo, like, oh my God, I mean, if they want this, we're not gonna doing product development as we should. Up until basically a couple of years ago, 1.5 years ago, when I start to rethinking, it's like almost questioning myself. I mean, there are people, a lot of more talk in the community about road mapping. And I've landed that you can do road mapping right, if you know what I mean. And I mean, to me, road mapping today means having a tool where you actually can define and align around the direction you want to move towards. So it's a lot about, defining the goals and defining like where you're heading and having an alignment around it. So that's like, if done right, it's really a powerful tool. But I've been burned a couple of times. So my relationship with roadmaps has not always been easy.
I laugh knowingly because it's such a wonderful answer. And I feel so the same. You land into a product management role. You're told, I want a roadmap. The stakeholder thinks they know what they mean. You think they know what you mean. You go online and look at what they might mean. You go and create something. And often, the first creation of a roadmap is something that we get burnt by. And that's actually one of the reasons for having this channel, Talking Roadmaps, and my own company, Roadmap Heroes, is to help people understand that's not what we mean and to rethink this. It's a very misunderstood area. So I love your response to that because it's so true, but we don't want people to learn the hard way.
No. Hopefully now we learn the hard way for them. I mean, that's the whole point of product communities, right? That people can learn from others' mistakes. And I mean, please don't go there. If someone asks you like a list of feature in a timeline, don't do that, please.
And in this, I'm sure this is something you feel passionate about as well. But by doing that, by having stakeholders requesting that, it's disempowering product teams and turning them into delivery teams.
Yeah, and I mean, I think like there are different, like depending a lot of the company when you work for. I mean, it happened to me many times when I was working at startups, and I mean, at that point was like that was basically a matter of company survival, right? I mean, we needed to hit certain targets and we needed to hit certain numbers. And I mean, the problem, exactly as you say, that there was someone somewhere in a room that thought that that exact feature will get us to hit those targets. And then basically what they wanted from me is like, okay, when is it out? When the conversation should be around, okay, what target do we need to hit? How do we know that we hit them best? Okay, that is a conversation that you can have to then define like in a timeline, okay, we're starting here and how much time do we have? Sometimes also times is big matter in that it was for me back then. I mean, we literally did not hit our numbers and the company doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, there's like shift in the conversation subject, but that's not always easy. It was not easy it's not what I thought about. I mean, the first time I got that PM title and someone asked that to me, I was like, okay, let's try. Team, help me. When can we get this out? I mean, you know, I did not think all those thoughts.
Absolutely. There's so much learning that we go through on here. And I want to pick up on something that you just mentioned, which is that there's a lot of different people that we speak to from a road mapping perspective, a lot of people that feed into that. So from your experience, who's been the audience of a roadmap?
That's a really, really interesting question, because I mean, if I go back how I think road mapping today, to me, it's basically laying out what we think are our best initiatives, opportunities, bets. I mean, there are a lot of terms around it that we will work on to deliver on our goal or strategy, depending on what your company is working with. So that alignment needs to happen across the board. I mean, I work with road mapping with our board of directors, for example, when it's like on a more strategic level. I work with road mapping with the management team. I work with road mapping with my PMs. They work with road mapping with the teams. Also, like there's a lot of different, we have 10 product development teams at Hemnet. So there's like syncing around those as well, where the roadmap is useful. And there's always, you know, that calibration of cross dependencies and level of details you have in a roadmap and you know, all these kind of things. But those conversation and the roadmap purpose, I would say that goes everybody in the company.
And it is a communication tool. It's something where we want to bring people along for that journey. And like you said, I think, you know, the most empowered roadmaps are ones that share with everybody. There might be different levels of information maybe, but if we've got a direction, everyone needs to follow in that same direction to get there.
Exactly. And I mean, of course, that's, I think right now is the trickiest part. And I mean, also I want to say we have not figure it out in all pieces of the puzzle, definitely not. And I mean, that's the trickiest part for me, at least, that you have like basically to say the same thing at different levels, because there are different level of details and understanding needed to actually make the roadmap work. And that results in a lot of different artifacts and a lot of different names that create confusion. You know, it's like finding that balance is something that we have not succeeded with yet.
Yeah, that's right. And it sounds like that the roadmap is maybe from a hub and spoke model. It's the roadmap is something, but it draws from many different areas. I think you touched on some of those. What do you think the relationship is from a roadmap to things like vision, strategy, objectives? How do you think those tie in together?
Yeah, and I mean that also I think it's super dependent on the company where you work for. I mean, I've been working on a company where we did not have such a long-term strategy, or that was not the purpose, right? But we still had goals. While right now we have all the pieces. We have the vision, we have the strategy, we have the product strategy, we have the roadmaps, we have the OKRs. I mean, almost you name it, we have it. And I mean, the most important thing, I think that all these pieces of the puzzle needs to be tied together. So, I mean, to me, is, for example, we're working right now. We have a product strategy. I mean, let's start. We have a vision and we have a company strategy. And that's the reason why we have a product strategy. Like we have, like, you know, for example, we're a public company, so we have to open goals for our company, which is one is about growth and one is about profitability. And I mean, it is because we have those goals that we have the product strategy we had. I mean, if we had something else, only profitability to 80%, I mean, that will have another type of product strategy, but we have both. So, I mean, those two is like answer the question why we have the product strategy we have. And then the product strategy, it's the baseline when we choose our objective for the year. And I mean, the strategy, I think it was Jana Basto. I was at a conference with her. She's like the inventor of the Now, Next, Later roadmap. And she said like this sentence that really stuck with me. Your roadmap is the prototype of your strategy, which I thought was really a brilliant way of framing it. So basically what do? You take your strategy and then you define, okay, what are the first steps? And you start executing and you start validate or invalidate them. And that's how the whole learning goes together. And we do it, breaking down. We have the strategy becomes objective in the OKR framework for the year. There's objective that goes into, we work with continuous discovery, so opportunity solution tree. And then with that, we get some learnings and we either tweak back the roadmap or we continue with it because we have even more evidence that we were right. So that's how we do it here at Hemnet. But before, I did not have strategy. I had some kind of we need to survive kind of goal. But I mean, if there's one element that I think should be there in every roadmap, no matter the company and no matter how many tools you have to support you, it's a goal. I mean, you need to know, what you're trying to achieve and how you measure that goal. And then with that, that's the very bare minimum, I would say, that you need to choose what to work on. Otherwise, you're gonna have as I had, I mean, in total honesty, a list of different features, which you will get them out of the door, but you will get that specific metric. Okay, did click or no click, but did you move the needle? You never know.
Oh, I love hearing that. I wish I'd heard you about 10 years ago when I kind of needed some of that guidance. I brought in a road mapping tool partly to help me at Vodafone to bring my team together and understand where we were going, but also to demonstrate that there's so many things I can pick apart from what you shared there. But you talked about company strategy decomposing into product strategy and being so vital, and sometimes a little bit further down. And what I wanted to demonstrate was there was pressure on me to provide strategy and direction to my team, but I also wanted to demonstrate that actually there was a lack of strategy and direction for us to tie into. The other bits that you mentioned, opportunity solution trees and Now, Next, Later. We've been fortunate enough to have Teresa Torres and Jana Basto both on the channel talking about those. Such valuable concepts. But hopefully to our listeners and maybe to some of our listeners that are new in the space, what Francesca's just said there is showing that whole line of sight from here all the way down. And also prototype for our strategy. These are hypotheses that we need to test, not fixed deliverables that we need to deliver no matter what, and we don't understand. I mean, there's just, Francesca, so much gold in what you just shared there.
Yeah, just like one thing, really. I mean, that's the biggest mistake I've made. I mean, and I think some people make or are, expected to deliver is a deliverable list. And that is if that's what you are asked to do, don't call it roadmap, because that's not a roadmap. The most important thing is that the roadmap evolves, and it should evolve with learning. It should also evolve. I mean, one important thing, 2023, everything that is happening around us that we cannot control. I would really love to know if anybody back even in December or when we sat defining November, December, when we normally sitting and decide next year roadmap, who knew about the economic downturn? Who knew about ChatGPT? Who knew around AI? And all these things might impact more or less your business. might impact more or less like the business goals. And I mean, those of course should be reflected in the roadmap. So find your way of getting in this learning and this evolution of the roadmap, and especially don't sell it as a set plan, because then you're gonna fail.
Absolutely, you're setting yourself up. It's not what a roadmap was for. If you're trying to do that, it's a delivery plan. It's a delivery schedule. Totally agree. Let's talk about just quickly who maintains a roadmap and who owns the roadmap, or maybe who owns it and who maintains it. Are they the same people, do you think?
I think that maintain, it's a really interesting word. I would say that this is a little bit visionary and there's a lot of details in the real world, day-to-day life. So, take it for what I am. But I think the vision for me is that the roadmap, of course, needs someone defining, okay, what is it, and driving the conversation. And to me, that is product. And exactly who in product depends a lot on your organizational structure. It can be VP, head of, for us it's like PMs, and then I have the at of like having the overarching perspective. But then it's really important that, who actually maintains. I would say that the learning maintain the roadmap. It's like what we did is we try to put in some moments when we reevaluate and we learn and we get those insights. And those insights can come from different ways. It can come from all the experiments that we've done. That's one. It can come from the market. And maybe we have it's the management or the board that say, okay, we have to change direction. It can come from your sales department because they say that, some customers are struggle more than others. And then we thought that we could monetize those customers. Yeah, maybe that's not a good idea. Because, something else changed in the macro factors. And it could come, from all the interviews that the teams do with the opportunity solution tree. That is like in the maintenance part, I would say that everyone has a responsibility to pitch in, and the responsibility of you owning the roadmap, whoever you might be in that organization, is that you have to make sure that those learnings, those inputs are part of the roadmap process. So that is not, someone sitting with their nice Excel sheet or, I don't know, whatever weapon you chose for your road mapping. And then the life happens somewhere else.
So we talked about some of the kind of the elements there. You're teasing about some of the things on the roadmap. What do you think are some of the key elements that you like to see on the roadmap?
I would say if I really have to make it as easy as possible, because you can really go nitty gritty in the roadmaps and go into literally like details of it. But for that to be understandable by everybody, in all those different layers we talked about, these different inputs you need to be clear about. I think you need a goal, which is basically like what you want to achieve. And that you might have that connected or not with a strategy, but you still need a goal. I would say you need key result or a key metric or success metric, whatever, numbers that tells you that you are proceeding in the right direction with that goal. So it's not only a formulation of, oh, we want to do this. Okay, how are we gonna actually measure that we are proceeding in the right way? And then I would also say that the road mapping also needs to include a formulation of the how we plan to achieve those goals. And it can be depending on how far you got with your learning, with your research, with your testing. It can be on different levels. Sometimes it can be a specific product with a specific go-to-market that you want to do. And that's especially important for B2B. We know how much flexibility we want. The many customers follow sales cycles that we kind of need to somehow jack into. So that you need that, and you need that level of definition when you get there and when you work with those products. And sometimes it can be like an idea about a discovery. It could be a completely something else that we believe is our best opportunity to reach that goal, but we don't know quite yet. So the level can be different, but a formulation of the how, I think it's important to tie back together. What you want to discuss is everyone aligned that these are the best things that we can do to drive those goals? If you don't have that formulation, that the conversation becomes really difficult.
Yeah, that's perfect answer. This is what we understand now at this point in time, and it may change. One bit that you picked up on, and I'm sensing this through just through our conversation, is the learnings and the testing and the hypotheses. I don't see enough of that with product teams. Is that something that you like to show on the roadmap, going, hey, we're thinking about exploring this area some more, and we're going to spend some time here to explore that?
I think we could be better at that. We have a lot of experimentation ingrained in our ways of working. It was like that. Before my times, I've been working at Hemnet for 4.5 years. And even before that, there was an ingrained culture of testing, of like A/B testing and hypothesis testing, which I think come a lot with one might say with the responsibility one feels on one's shoulder when we work with one of Sweden's biggest product. You want to do it right. So that was something we had. We added on top of that opportunity solution tree. And we are trying much more depending on how we formulate our roadmap to define this is something we know more about, this is something we don't know yet, but we believe in. But this, you're pointing at something because again, I don't want to give the impression that we have it all figured out, because we don't. And this is, I think, really important to talk about. It's not that everyone does everything perfect. There's a lot of roller coasting going on. And this is something that sometimes it's a bit challenging for us. Like having that conversation. What is something you're exploring or discovering or you're not sure about, and what's something you're sure about? Because what's the difficulty of that? Maybe if you're like someone who's interested in that roadmap, but you're not like working day to day with it, you might get the impression that all the items in the roadmap are the same when they're not. And then it becomes a little bit, okay, what happened with that thing you were working on? Oh, it was just a test. Oh, but we sold it in. It's like this kind of misunderstanding and this kind of navigate different kind of levels sometimes we do it right. Sometimes we don't do it right. I don't have the silver bullet because we've done it wrong a couple of times, giving the impression that what we were doing was actually decided. What we were doing was one way that actually it turned out not to be the best one, and then we just trashed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I still get the feeling that companies aren't changing their roadmaps enough, and I think what they need to be doing is saying, look, changing them frequently to get to almost show, look, this is where our thoughts are right now. Things are changing, because if you change a roadmap quite frequently, it also shows that your thinking is changing. It shows that we're not sure on some of these things. So I think companies make the mistake of saying, they create the roadmap, don't change it for 6 months, God forbid it, in a year's time. And because their stakeholders don't see that change, they assume that it's concrete. And I think changing that roadmap frequently is almost helpful in that people then start to go, okay, this document can change, the roadmap and the thinking can change. I'm going to treat it as if it's something that can change, because it can and it should.
Yeah, and I would love to hear your thoughts. That's one thing that I have in my head lately. I've not made up my mind yet. But one challenge that I see, I totally agree with you, Justin. It should change. Otherwise, it means that you have not learned anything in the time frame that has passed. And we have this quarterly review, and those, But I also thinking about how we at least treat the timeline of a roadmap. We still start the year and we treat, okay, what are going to next year? And I think more and more it's connected, that is connected with how the company financials work. You need to hit, if you have 12 months, you need to hit some certain targets in these 12 months. As a public company, especially, you need to have certain numbers, certain quarter. When in reality, what I'm feeling more and more is that we maybe, I'm not sure yet, but maybe we should consider like a rolling 4-quarter for our roadmap. Like, you have something and you learn every quarter and you adapt and you go further and you kind of keep that loop instead of thinking, okay, now we're sitting and defining a plan for the next 12 months and then we revisit, but it's still, when it's the 31st of December, it's cut. And then we need to do something else.
I think sometimes we're almost caught into, I think sometimes we don't challenge enough. And so, we don't challenge our thinking enough. And that's where product management, and what I've learned from product management is great, is being curious and to try and find out why. I completely understand what you're saying. I think sometimes because roadmaps are looking at, it needs the whole company to get behind it. Sometimes we can be bound by the milestones or the cadences of other departments. So I think just because we do financial planning, and that might be, at the beginning of the quarter, or sorry, they look at a financial year, that we somehow bind ourselves to that in product management. And there is no need necessarily. We need to know what budgets we've got and we're spending, but that's just an annual top up. And I love your thought about this rolling roadmap, because we don't in quarter one have visibility 12 months out, and we don't by quarter three only think about what's coming up in the next 3 months. That's not how we work when we're in product teams. So we do work on the rolling window, but I think we work with organizations or teams within our companies that do very much do that fixed, and we should almost disconnect ourselves a little bit.
I mean, I would love if anyone listening to this has like thoughts about it. If you're done in a rolling, let us know. I would love.
Exactly. And I think Jana's roadmap, the now, next, later, is helpful in doing that, because it tends to try and encourage us to disconnect from, we have time frames, but even then they're not necessarily quarters. They can literally be now, next, later. And I think that is helpful in that rolling type roadmap there. But yeah, audience, let us know in the comments what you think. Help us out here. Have you seen something that's worked well for you? We'd love to hear. Francesca, I want to go into, actually, we've alluded to it already, which is one of your preferred ways to visualize and style for a roadmap. You come across as a creative person to me. So I think something that looks beautiful and compelling is important. You've also talked about now, next, later. Is that how you like to sort of create and present your roadmaps?
We tied roadmap with OKRs. That's like the main. So I'm in the very beginning of the year when I normally like to go back and say, okay, this is the why are we doing this? So we tie it with the product strategy, and we tie it with OKRs, so which are on a company level, and then we kind of go from there. But if I have to be completely honest, I have not found a super sustainable way of working with roadmaps. We work with those are presentation that we do, so those are slides. But then, I mean, as things change, it's like, yeah, you have a lot of different versions and you don't know which one is the most updated. Then the teams that work and do the learning, some work with Miro and some work with Trello, or the combination of both depending on how they do. And then that is not automatically connected with the roadmap. We have a common backlog that is in a sheet document, because the most important there is like the priority. But that is not super, there's a lot of detail. So for somebody that just want to overview, you're not gonna get that. So as you are noticing when I'm talking, we have a lot of different things, but I've not figured out quite yet which is the best. I tried, for what we do now, try always to think about the audience and what is important for that audience at that specific time. And many times when I talk about the roadmap is more about the overarching view. And then I try to mostly connect the dots. And therefore, I use slides, for example.
Yeah, and that's so true. This is the reason why there isn't one size fits all roadmap template out there, because it is a communication tool. It needs to communicate to your stakeholders within your company. And every stakeholder within every company is different. And so you have to tailor it to that audience. And I don't think this one size fits all really works there. I think sometimes tools can be very helpful, but it's difficult when they're, again, I had teams giving me roadmaps in different things that I had to create a summary view, and I'm sure you do as well, which can have its own challenges. But in terms of the way that roadmap is styled, it has to do its job of communicating to that audience what they need to know. And in those instances, it can be very different.
And I mean, just another piece of advice, don't start with the tool. I mean, I've been doing that so many times. I was like, oh, if we just had this tool that will visualize in this way, and then we spent a lot of time. I'm not going to reveal with this complex tool on the market to set it up, and it still did not make the job right. So I mean, the tool won't fix.
Totally agree. And there's so much that you said there that resonates with me. So I think the process of road mapping is the most important one, going through that thought process. Tools are there really just to expedite process. And from what I've found, I don't know if you were familiar, but I've worked at AHA for 3 years. So I kind of was really passionate about roadmaps, introduced AHA. I was there for 3 years. And now I'm running my own consultancy, Roadmap Heroes, which is more, we're moving into more of an agnostic space, because what I found during that time was that the tool is great, but if you don't know what your road mapping processes are, the tool's not going to help. And so, it's really important there. Again, it's not the silver bullet. It can help in some cases, but if you don't understand the purpose of road mapping and the process of road mapping, a tool's not going to help you completely. So such good advice there. And I would absolutely echo that to our viewership and our readership, or listenership even, is that understand the purpose of road mapping and what you're trying to achieve with it. What's the job to be done? And then look at if there's tools that can help. Don't start with the tools.
Many times you can start kind of easy. Like, many times you have already the simplest form of those tools that you can test with. And then if you really feel you need the next level, then there are tools that are made for this in the market.
I think that's such a good best practice with road mapping. If you're new to road mapping and you're listening, definitely start with that example of what Francesca's mentioned. Start simple, be curious, product managize your road mapping process can do you a lot of benefit. If those are some of the best practice, what do you think are some of the mistakes that people make? And I think we probably talked about that earlier, because we've made those too.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest mistake that I see and I've done, it's like a feature roadmap, or a feature list in the shape of a so-called roadmap, and especially a feature list of feature that, God knows how they are connected. Is like more a wish list, wishful thinking from somebody, not connected with any kind of goal. That's like a pretty common mistake. Also, that is something like all the listener viewers, please have an honest view of what you have in your backlog, and try to, what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing feature? Are you prioritizing behavioral changing? Are you prioritizing something that drives you towards a goal? That's like the very first sanity check you can do. And then you can move those in a timeline, in a roadmap. I also think that the super big mistake that we touched upon is that communicating the roadmap as something static and done and fixed, and is gonna be delivered exactly as it is in that Excel or sheet or tool visualization of your choice, because that basically is based on one extremely big assumption that I've never seen becoming true, that is things do not change, or you do not learn, or you're always right from the beginning. And if you already know everything and you feel 300% correct, and you believe that nothing you will learn or nothing will change outside of your door by any means, you have like a biggest competitive advantage ever, because you can bet safely and you can just deliver. But I've never seen it happening. So please don't, big mistake is like thinking that the roadmap is like fixed and won't change. Because then you're gonna have a lot of trouble explaining why something changed, because you learn. So you kind of have to justify your learning, which is not something you want to do. You want to use your learning to tweak your roadmap. not, to the other way around.
Absolutely. It seems crazy to me, and it's still laughable. You can speak to the sales team and say, how much revenue are you going to bring in 18 to 24 months time? We don't know. How much are the marketing team going to be consuming from the budget to go and market to our customers? We don't know. Why can't you tell us what the product roadmap is going to look like fixed for 18 months? You're building something. It's like, why is there a level of uncertainty that we afford to these other functions? And yet when we think about product teams where we're building something new, by the way, we've never done this before, we hold them to knowing exactly how long things are going to take. It's madness, but it's almost this bias that you find with people that somehow, because we're building something new, we're going to know exactly how long it takes. It's madness.
Yeah, I think it's like, in my experience, it's a little bit connected to the two factors. One, sales teams, marketing team, they might don't know exactly, but they do have a goal and a target. Those are really explicit. And it's not always just the goal and the target for product are so explicit. So that's like circling back on the importance of having goals. And the other part, I think that, one always have to be a little bit self-critical. And there are some teams, and I've done it myself as well. You say, oh, we need to be agile, and then we don't want to, commit to anything, or like, oh, we need to do research, and then we close the door, see you in 6 months. That ain't gonna fly either. So it needs to find like that balance of having that goal, and also I would another piece of advice. It's like try to find those smaller deliverables in your roadmap that can actually show progress, because as when you show progress, actually another, I think you're seen with other lenses. Exactly as you were saying, like different department. You have an all other negotiation power, even like, for your discovery time, if you're at the same time delivering. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want, to hit those targets and deliver this value for the customers and the business.
Yeah, it's a confidence thing. It's showing that we are delivering some stuff. It's getting trust in it. And I think, as we the world comes around to outcome-based road mapping, that it's actually saying, look, we can't describe all of this stuff. It's almost the roadmap is helping provide some trust into our team's process to say that we're working on what we say we will. This is what we think we need to be working on. Getting some quick wins in there to build that confidence. But also when we say that we need some more time or we're not sure, giving us that flexibility to go away and run some more tests or some more hypotheses. Love that response. So maybe a quick question on this one is there a pet hate that you just don't like to see on the roadmap?
A feature that doesn't tie at all with our strategy. If I have, or even it doesn't have to be a feature, like whatever, something because we need to do this because of this client, whatever, but it's completely misaligned with what we're trying to achieve. That I don't want to see in the roadmap. Still, if you flip the coin, if you have that visualized, you can at least have that conversation. So it's much better than like someone working on it behind the scene, if you know what I mean.
Do you think that, and I totally agree with you, do you think that sometimes it might be that we do know we need to work on a feature, but we need to add something to our strategy to accommodate that? So I think sometimes we want to get away from pet projects where we put a feature in because we need to deliver it and we don't tie it into strategy. But is it possible that if we do have a feature that we know that we need to work on, it alludes that there should be an element of strategy that we create to accommodate it?
Yeah, I think so. To me, it's like, as I like to think about it, we have this strategy. For us, it's like we have formulated as a customer behavior. And that should be the baseline of how you choose what to prioritize. So like, is this driving this behavior or this is not driving this behavior? If the answer is no, then I will argue, okay, why are we doing it? And if we have that in the roadmap, that might be a conscious choice, but we need at least to have a conversation of why we are deciding to take that conscious choice. And in my experience, many times has been not a conscious choice. So that's why I think those kind of like derailing from the strategy If like one has to be really general, those are the ones that I don't want to see in the roadmap.
Francesca, you've got some great thoughts around road mapping and obviously some amazing experience around product management. Whose advice do you typically listen to, and maybe in the field of road mapping specifically?
Yeah, I for road mapping, I have two favorite ones. And one is Gianna Basto. I think she's really great, and I mean she has my favorite tagline that I always use. And the other one is John Cutler. I think is also is more like, I think he's done a couple of visualization about also how to connect road mapping to execution. So it goes a little bit also into the sprint planning or whatever you might be working on, to see how to incorporate learnings in that to feed back to the roadmap. And also I think he does a really good visualization of how to talk about the uncertainty levels on the different pieces. So that's those are the two.
Love that, and I think that's really important as well. Talking about uncertainty or sometimes confidence in our hypotheses or what we're working on is really important to communicate. Again, that the roadmap is not a fixed delivery plan, and neither should it be. I wonder if you had to distill your philosophy of road mapping into just a couple of sentences, how would you describe it?
I mean, when you think about your roadmap, think about direction, think about collaboration, and think about evolution. So if you are able to tie the three together, then you have like this prototyping of your strategy that keeps on evolving based on how you collaborate in your company and how well you're receptive of everything that is happening around you. And that should be setting you up for success.
But also with the fact that it's going to evolve, it's a part of a process. Those things can move around together. That's such an articulate response, Francesca. I love that one. And so I wonder if there's anything about road mapping that I should have asked you but haven't. What are your thoughts? Anything that I should have asked or you want to mention about roadmaps?
I think we touched the most. Please learn from my mistakes. Don't do those features. Also, I would really, really love to hear if someone is working with this rolling quarter and how you make it work with financial or other company structures, if we want to call it like that. So that's more a shout out to the community.
Totally. And I think that also picks up on the fact of why road mapping is different, because it depends on your product maturity, your company maturity, the type of product. It depends on so many things as to what your rhythm is going to be on the roadmap, the detail that you show. And that's why I think, in a classic product management term, it depends. And I love that response.
We are really political answer.
Francesca, it's been wonderful speaking to you. Just wanted to give you an opportunity just to share with our audience again what it is that you do and how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, lovely talking with you, Justin, as well, in this foggy morning here in Stockholm. And one thing that I'm really passionate about, and I try to share as much as I can, is how we do or think about product in practice. Because there's a lot of theory, and we can all learn and read theory, but there are not so many people sharing how they actually do and the trade-offs and such. So I write about it on my blog, which has my name, francescacortesi.com. So I wrote a little bit about road mapping. I will write more as we learn. So that's one way. And the next time, if you want to meet me in person, I'm also going to be speaking at a Product at Heart conference in Hamburg. That's at the end of June, I believe. So those are the tools. And of course, like, you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Francesca, we'll put those details down in the description so our audience can connect with you. Hopefully you'll see some comments around what they've thought of as well. But just wanted to end there. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, being generous with your time and your knowledge. So many things that you've said have resonated with me. I wish I'd known some of those when I was first starting out. There's some bits that I've learned from you now and some little bits that I'm going to take away as well. To our audience, if anything that Francesca and I have said has resonated with you, please do consider liking the channel or liking the video. Please drop us a comment below and let us know, and consider subscribing to keep up to date with other sessions we might have with other people. If you do want to get in touch and be where Francesca is now, let us know again. We'd love to have you in the hot seat. But for now, Francesca, I hope the sky's clear for you. Have a wonderful week ahead, and thank you for being with us.
You too. Bye-bye.